My guest today is Lisa King, the founder of Free AF Drinks, who has got a 40% market share in New Zealand and has launched in the US 2 years ago and is doing incredibly well with 4,500 doors, as they say over there, across Sprouts, Target, Walmart, Whole Foods and Kroger. We talk about what it takes to build a business, not just in New Zealand, not just in the UK, but also in the States, what that means in terms of team, in terms of investment, in terms of the scale of your ambition, how you do that when you're on different time zones. And also we talk about something really interesting, which is building a business with your future acquirer in mind. You're going to love this. Let's dive in. Lisa King from Free AF. Welcome to Brand Growth Heroes.
Hi, Fiona.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you. A little bit jet lagged.
I know, you've just come back from the States and now you're in the UK. So what were you doing in the States before we dive into how you've built this amazing business?
Yes, I just moved from New Zealand to Miami like 4 months ago.
That's incredible. So Free AF started in 2019, was it?
At the very end of 2020.
The very end of 2020. And you are the number one alcohol-free cocktail brand, or is it just cocktails the way you define your category?
Yeah, ready to drink.
Ready to drink in New Zealand with 40% market share. And you've launched in the US 2 years ago and you've already got, 4,000 stores across which retailers?
Close to 4,500 now across Target, Walmart, Sprouts. We just launched into Whole Foods and Kroger as well.
Wow. One of the reasons we really wanted to have you on the show, obviously non-alcoholic. It's funny, I always say non-alcoholic. What are you calling it in the States?
Yeah, in the States they call it non-alcoholic
Right, okay.
as well. So you're on the money.
Non-alcoholic is obviously a really interesting category. It's starting to mature a little bit. We all know what it is these days and why consumers are buying into it and drinking it. But what we don't know is what's it like in New Zealand? What's it like in the States? How do you make those decisions? Because they are scary decisions to move from a relatively small, compact market. You didn't choose Australia. You've chosen the States. Really interested in that. The fact that you've got trademarked secret ingredient. Want to hear all of this. So take us back, and maybe it's worth saying as well to our listeners. By the way, listeners, if you haven't looked up AF Drinks, Google it right now so you know what we're talking about while we talk, because otherwise it's always difficult to imagine something. You've got some really funky, quite cool cans that are very adult, very ready to drink, quite alcohol-like, aren't they, really, in their look and feel?
Yeah.
Talk to us about what you did before you launched this business, because I think people always love to hear about what founders did before.
Yeah, so look, I spent the first 15 years of my career in FMCG marketing. I spent 2 years actually working for Unilever in the UK.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
What brands were you working on?
I was working on Slim Fast. I don't know if you remember that brand.
I do. I made the mistake of when I had James McMaster of Huel on the show in season 1 of comparing Huel to Slim Fast. It didn't go down too well.
Yes, I worked in the UK for a couple of years before heading back to New Zealand.
Was that like on the grad scheme, or no, you just got a placement over here?
Yeah, I got a place with the regional brand team and we were relaunching Slim Fast, beyond shakes into soups and bars and meals. So yeah, it was a really fun time. And, I listened to probably 300 women all around the UK talk about weight loss.
But it's an important point, though, is that when you are doing that with a big food co, you get to learn from bosses and agencies about, how to brief market research, how to listen to focus groups, how to prompt in focus groups, even if you're not doing it yourself. You get a lot of muscle memory, don't you? And then you're able to take that with you, right?
Yeah, because I think, when you're a founder, people who haven't been there, they'll be like, how did you do that? Like, how did you know where to start with product formulations or, marketing? And I think it's only now that I was like, oh, it's all that amazing training that I got at Unilever. My boss was from Procter & Gamble.
Wow. Attention to detail and clarity of thought.
Absolutely.
I don't say these things, by the way, just to anyone out there who's listening and rolling their eyes going, well, we don't all have that, experience or background. I don't say it lightly, but the reason I'm kind of saying it is, the more people like that you can maybe read book or listen to, the more you can pick up, and then you can overlay it and integrate it into your own mind map of how to make this work, and be aware that there are founders out there who do have this background that you're up against. And so being able to meld the agility and the creativity of creating a new category with that kind of thinking is a great bonus, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely an advantage, I think, when you're starting out.
So what happened then? Unilever, and then?
Yeah, I went back to New Zealand and, worked for the likes of Washies and Cadbury's. I was the marketing manager for chocolate.
Wow.
And then in 2015, I kind of decided to leave that world and start my first business, which was a for-profit social enterprise called Eat My Lunch.
What did that do?
Surprisingly, people think New Zealand's this bountiful country and, we have all this incredible food and no one goes hungry, but we actually have quite a huge child poverty issue in New Zealand.
Okay.
And a lot of kids were going to school without food. And I was just kind of thinking, how could I use my business skills with wanting to solve this big social issue, but not run a charity? And so I decided to combine those two things together and came up with this business model. And it was really inspired by Tom's shoes of buy one, give one.
Okay.
And so basically we would sell lunches to corporates and they would fund a lunch for a kid who would go to school that day without. Yeah. And so we ran that for close to 7 years. And in that time, we gave about 4.5 million lunches. This is
wonderful.
A population of 5 million people. And yeah, just before kind of COVID, the government decided to pick up the program and roll it out nationally. So we went from feeding, about 2,000 children a day to now the government program feeds about 160,000 kids a day.
Wow. And were they inspired by your initiative in your business?
Yeah, we were the only ones kind of really tackling that issue. And, I think what it showed them was that, hang on, here's a business, using their own profits to really solve quite a large social issue.
That's wonderful, Lisa. What a legacy. I mean, that's really amazing.
Yeah, so that was an incredible business, and it was the first kind of business model of its kind in New Zealand. And when I started, no one had even heard the word social enterprise.
I've heard social enterprise, but I've never heard a for-profit social enterprise. So can you explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, so what I decided was I didn't want a not-for-profit organization that was relying on grants and funding to run, and to really run it like a business. So there was a commercial reality where we were making money, we hired people and got in revenue from our corporate customers. But at the same time, at the heart of all of that was this massive social mission to feed hungry kids in New Zealand.
Now, it's really interesting because we're about to go into our third cohort of the Brand Growth Heroes Mini MBA. And one of the brands that got a place on this year's program, we've got 15 brands, is House of Sin, spelled CINN. Look them up, but they're a social enterprise who work with homelessness, and they're cinnamon buns, and they're in Sainsbury's, and they're fresh cinnamon buns. I mean, it's really single-minded focus. So I love to learn about these things because then I can share back into my community and connect people, or just, say, listen to as many podcasts as you can that Lisa's been on, because you'll learn. So opening up the hive mind and making connections is really what we try and do. Did that mean then, coming into lockdown, when the government decided to do that after lockdown, did you decide, right, we're not going to do it anymore, there's no point, or that need is now served in a different way, in a bigger way?
Yeah, we always said, our success will be when we actually closed our doors, because we weren't needed anymore. And that kind of felt like the right time to do that. And, obviously with COVID, New Zealand had one of the harshest shutdowns.
Yeah.
So, people weren't going to work. Our revenue had dropped at that point. And even after lockdowns, people weren't going back to work in the same way.
Totally different, yeah.
Yeah. So we just felt like that was a really good time for us to kind of step away and let the government do their thing. And at the same time, I decided, I'd actually had really bad vertigo a couple of times. And I kind of associated it with every time I had a gin and tonic. And so
it wasn't just a hangover, was it?
No.
Yeah, no, that can be awful. A friend of mine's really crippled with that every few years. It's horrible.
Yeah. The first time it happened, I had no idea what it was. I actually just thought, oh God, I've had too much to drink, but not being able to get up and constantly feeling like your head's spinning.
Awful.
So yeah, it was really terrible. I just thought, okay, I'm just going to stop drinking for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I think the only thing we had available in New Zealand was Seedlip and Heineken Zero, and I'm not a beer drinker. And I just was like, I really just want a gin and tonic, but without the alcohol.
Yeah, that tastes like something. And we're obviously I'm a huge fan of what Seedlip has achieved. We've had Seedlip on the show, the founder on the show. Huge fan of what they've achieved. But personally, for me, it tastes like botanical water. And I have a real issue with that, not with Seedlip. That's not enough for me. I want something that actually tastes like alcohol,
Yeah, and I felt like you kind of had to make it taste good by adding
alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm joking.
Or, flavored tonic or something.
At the very least. Okay.
At the very least.
Hey, just a quick word about Brand Growth Heroes partner, Jolson. So look, as a founder, you've got loads in your plate. Fundraising, shareholders, co-founders, co-manufacturing, product, NPD, you name it. Scaling is really complex, and the legal side of scaling can be really complex too. Who your legal partner is really matters because it's not something we can afford to get wrong. That's why I work with Jolson. Jolson have worked with brands like Little Moons, Trip, Two Chicks, Grays, Cross to Malika, and they've even advised the innocent founders on their sale to Coca-Cola, and they still work with them today at Jam Jar. And for me, it's not just that they're brilliant at what they do, but they're also really good people. They care about founders. They care about doing things properly, and that really matters. And they're also one of the few law firms that's both B Corp certified and a member of 1% for the Planet. Recently, I asked Jolson's managing partners, Phil Hale-Smith and Paul Chappie, whether it really can make a difference from a commercial perspective if you work with a corporate lawyer who not only understands your business, but also knows you and what you're trying to achieve.
The deals that you can negotiate can deliver massively different results because you've got someone that has lived and breathed that for, decades alongside you. And you're often behind the scenes, so you're not actually going to be visible.
It's like having kryptonite in your pocket.
Exactly. That's what Jolson is.
Yeah,
we're kryptonite in your pocket. That's it. Thank you very much. Okay,
Job
we can
done.
finish now.
Job done.
I'm going to get Paul a special t-shirt with kryptonite written on it now.
Yeah, maybe not in your pocket though, just kryptonite. You're not going to believe this, but Jolson is actually offering a free legal consultation to any founders who listen to Brand Growth Heroes podcast. And I would definitely take them up on it. You'll find a link to book now directly here in the show notes below, or just drop a comment underneath the episode and I will connect you with them directly.
This was a lockdown project I got from my previous life, lots of contacts in the advertising agency. And, God, beverage is like the hardest category to get into.
Why? Because it is easy from there's lots of canning lines, there's lots of flavour houses. Then what? Why is it difficult?
It's the competition. You're up against the Pepsis and the Cokes of the world, and just the amount of money, this shelf space. Like we just, having worked in that world, I just know how hard it is to compete.
Okay.
And there's so many brands that come and go.
And I suppose the whole brand identity and creating something that talks to people on a kind of an identity level, an emotional level, rather than just product is so important. And that takes spend, right?
Yeah, so much investment. And unless you've got endless amounts of money, it's hard to compete with the big guys. For me, it was all about branding. But also at the same time, when I got this group of amazing creative people together, and we're all like really old and, had years in advertising and like FMCG, we were all kind of just during COVID probably didn't have that much to do.
Yeah.
So it
was a nice side project.
A little side project, could see it coming, and I saw what was going on in the UK at the time around this category. And I thought, okay, well, it's going to come to New Zealand soon. And if we could do it, like this group of incredible creatives could probably get this incredible brand together. We had to make sure we had the absolute right tasting liquid because we had tried so many terrible non-alc products.
Had it been just you on your own, would you have done it? Or was it the fact that you had these people around you that you felt I'm just thinking to those people out there who are listening, you know, sometimes an idea could be lost because maybe it's just about finding people around you who actually do have the experience as well and are, you know, senior enough in their careers to kind of say, no, I buy into what you're saying. No, I do. I think you're right here. Did that make a difference to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, coming out of Eat My Lunch, that experience as a first-time founder is, you know, and lots of founders say, like, it's quite lonely.
Mm-hmm.
I knew, like, going into this venture, I didn't want to do it all on my own.
Okay.
But absolutely having the right people with these incredible skills and expertise, like, it's so energy giving.
You can answer this in a roundabout way because obviously I'm not asking for anything like too personal or anything. But I imagine if I was a founder at that point, I'd be thinking, oh yeah, but if I get them involved, like, are they all going to want equity or I'm going to have to pay them and I don't have any money yet? How do you manage that awkwardness at the beginning that you still have them involved, but yet you don't yet have a business? So what advice can you give on that bit?
Yeah, I think it's so hard. Like, you have nothing of value to at that point, just this idea. And so all of the so I got like 5 creative guys together. You know, it was this Nick was the creative director of one of the biggest agencies in New Zealand. Got the brand strategist from there. You know, the incredible designer, and also the finance guy, but who'd worked in agency. So I kind of got these guys together and I offered them sweat equity because there's just no way I could pay for that. And I had done that with Eat My Lunch as well. Like, when we first started, you know, I knew like a lot of our success depended on PR. So we'd given the PR agency sweat equity. I'd got this celebrity chef on board, gave him equity. And that's kind of at the beginning, that's all you have, unless you've got a ton of cash to offer these people. And I'm probably a founder. I know like a lot of founders will be like, oh, you got to hold on to as much equity as possible. I am actually the complete opposite.
Okay.
I don't worry much about equity.
Tell us. This is great.
Well, for me, it's always, it goes back to, you know, do you want 100% of nothing, or would you rather have 20% of, you know, a $50 million business or a $100 million business? So as we go through, you know, like setting up, bringing people on board, investors, you know, advisors, everything you need later down the stage, like, equity is generally the first thing I will offer, because cash at that point is so important in the business.
Yeah.
I don't want to give that up.
But I'd love to come back to some advice at the end where we talk about how you structured that in your second business so that you weren't giving away too much, but that you had a pool to play from. So you launched in New Zealand, and it obviously flew because you have 40% market share of that market.
Yeah, well, actually at the beginning, you know, it was the end of COVID or end of our lockdown. So bars and restaurants weren't open. And I think, you know, for us, the brand is like an alcohol brand. We wanted it to feel like you were still having the drink. And so from the liquid to the look of the can, the name, the way that, you know, we serve it and so forth. And a few of the guys had worked on some alcohol brands previously. And so, you know, an alcohol brands launch on premise in bars and restaurants. We didn't have that available to us because of COVID. And so we had to start with the supermarket, which is complete opposite of what people would tell you for alcohol or building alcohol brands. And the supermarkets, they'd never, like, they were just like, what is this? You know, like, why would people want a gin and tonic with no alcohol in it? And where do we put it? Like, does it sit with alcohol? Does it sit in soft drinks? What's the pricing? So it was so new. We kind of had to create the category with retailers and educate them along the way, as well as consumers. You know, we'd do sampling and people would be tasting and go, oh, it's great, it's a gin and tonic, and then realize there's no alcohol in it.
Okay.
And sometimes they would put it back, even though they liked it.
Which SKUs did you launch with?
We actually launched with 3 gin and tonics. So we had, you know, like your classic one with a bit of lemon, a cucumber one as a nod to like your Hendrix and cucumber, and a pink grapefruit G&T, because pink gin was a thing at the time. Yeah, but then we quickly moved into other cocktails, such as a dark and stormy, an Aperol spritz,
Which are both lovely, can I just say? And let's talk about that actually, because there's something quite different about the way in which you go about designing and making your liquid. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's quite insightful.
Yeah, so, I think as we were talking about, you want something that does still feel really adult and complex and feels like you're having a great, sophisticated drink. And so we start off with like our benchmark is the alcoholic version. So we'll find the best alcoholic dark and stormy, using like the best spiced rum and the best ginger ale, and would use that as the benchmark for product development. And then we'll go away and make sure that like we're delivering on all the complexity and the different layers that you would get in that great cocktail. So you'll taste it in our Aperol Spritz. It's, you've got the Italian orange bitterness, as well as that kind of like a slightly winey Prosecco taste, a little bit of that Aperol medicinal flavor in there as well. And then we also knew like we wanted it to taste as far away from just being a soft drink as possible. And alcohol is often about, mouthfeel. And so we wanted to replicate that and that spirit bite or burn that you get from a great alcoholic drink. And so we found this ingredient and we call it Afterglow. And it's specially made in New Zealand. It's an ingredient that's been used in other applications, but it had never been actually used in a liquid before. And so we added it and we're like, yeah, actually we do get that little burn at the back of your throat and that warming feeling that you get after you've had a couple. And for each of us, it was quite a different experience. Like for me, after 2 AFs, my cheeks get a bit warm.
Okay.
For some of the guys, it's like in their chest or in their ears. So we kind of knew like drinking, there is this ritual, it's part of the experience, but also that feeling that you get when you drink.
Yeah.
And that's what we really wanted to recreate with the Afterglow.
Okay, so over time then you've learned, I suppose, what works, what doesn't work, and you've ended up in the cocktail space. The brand must have become pretty famous pretty quickly in New Zealand, did it?
Yeah, it did. And, again, being a second-time founder, it helps because you've kind of had a profile, particularly in a small place like New Zealand. So it was kind of easy to leverage that.
Okay. So you ended up with a business that was generating cash and margin, and you were in the supermarkets in New Zealand and people would have known who you were. And then you made a decision to play somewhere else. So talk to us about that decision.
From the very beginning, we had made the decision that this had to be a global business.
Okay.
Because New Zealand is so small, we knew there would be a restriction in terms of how far we could take it. And so we had planned from the start, like co-packing. We didn't want to invest in assets. We always say like our values in our IP and in our brand. We knew this co-packing model meant that we could actually scale globally very quickly. And then, of course, like most New Zealand businesses, we looked to Australia, which is about 5 times bigger than New Zealand. When we actually looked, not many New Zealand businesses make it successfully across the ditch. And people think Australians and Kiwis are so similar, but we actually have very, very different tastes.
It's like Ireland and the UK, really, very different countries, different taste profiles.
Yeah. And so we were talking to an ex-Coca-Cola exec. Actually, we were talking to him about investment. And he just said, look, forget Australia. He said, if you guys are looking for, a potential acquisition by one of the big guys, no one cares about New Zealand and Australia. If you can make it either on the west coast or east coast of the US or in the UK, that's where all your value is going to come from.
So that's why you made the decision. That's really interesting. You wanted to expand, but you had in mind that at some point you want to be acquired by a particular type of business. You see, this is why it's so important to know that from the beginning, because the decisions you make, and this is what we go through in the mini MBA, unless you have a really clear vision of the type of business you want in 3 to 5 years, you won't know what to build and where to build it in a way that signals to who you want to buy it, or who you want to buy it, or if you don't want someone to buy it, the kind of business that you want to build over 20 years. This is such a great case study.
Do you know, we went to the US, we went to California, because we're like, actually, there's a huge state of 50 million people. If we only just won in California, that would be a massive win for us. And California is like such a trendsetter for beverages and things like that. We were shocked that there weren't actually other brands and products like ours when we went there in 22. It was really surprising because we just thought we'd be late, might be number 10.
Yeah.
There's not many opportunities a brand gets to be first in a second market, but in the US. So we definitely thought, okay, we're going to go to the US. And also the UK, it was much more mature in this category at the time. And the other factor, which sounds silly, was that just the time difference with New Zealand, just the practicalities of trying to run a business. Yeah, that's 12 hours different. We just thought, okay, no, we have a direct flight from New Zealand to LA. The time zone works much better, and we have an opportunity to be first here.
I think that makes perfect sense. Okay, so how long then did it take you to get traction in California?
So we did a market trip in July. We got an indication of ranging in December, and that was our first production. We knew as a small startup, it's one of our biggest advantages is the ability to move fast. And we had the small window to be one of the first. And so, it's like July to December was all it took for us to get set up in the US.
So who did you have that listing with?
With a retailer called Sprouts.
Wow,
They're similar to Whole Foods, yeah. And we had said to them, hey, we want to do a trial. We want to go to California, maybe do 50 stores, see how it goes. They called us during that first production and said, actually, guys, this has to go national in 400 stores or nothing.
Okay.
You're not really in a position to turn that down, even though that wasn't our plan.
Talk to us about the funding without, I don't want to get sidetracked down the funding route yet, but what were you thinking in terms of cash flow that was going to be needed in order to fund this much bigger venture than you imagined, rather than just a 50-store trial? You were going to 400 stores. And how did you know how to forecast that in terms of actual cans needed? Really
tricky because, again, this was a new category. Sprouts was the first retailer in the US to actually invest in this category.
Okay.
So there was no previous data of run rates or, how this was going to go. From a fundraising point of view, we had already started a lot of conversations and we had a few connections in the US. But our first kind of major non-New Zealand investor was the venture arm of Pernod Ricard.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And they invested in us before we even launched in the US.
Wow. And do they have a big stake?
They have about 16%.
So then that's a bit of a nice piece of feedback from the market that you eventually want to sell to in terms of how appealing you are already. It's a nice little feedback loop, isn't it, as a business?
As you were saying, our intention was to always kind of have the business acquired. And, the kind of obvious choices were these alcohol companies. Yeah. And so we spoke to actually every one of them.
So I'm really interested, when you got into the state and you started to see rate of sale or velocity, was it what you expected? And also, when did the incumbents in the market start to come in and say, oh God, this is a thing we're going to start launching too? And then did the velocity in the category need to be shared across everybody in there? Is it more difficult to compete now? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, really hard. Like I said, there's no benchmarks. And, even when potential investors asked us, well, what do retailers expect you to be selling? Even they didn't know. And we're like, we don't know. So definitely, I think it's probably a bit slower than we expected.
Okay.
And when you look across other beverages, it's not selling as fast or as much as, say, functional beverages, and definitely not as much as alcohol either. So we're kind of somewhere in between in that real grey area. The minute Sprouts started, within 6 months, we got a call from Target. And they saw what was going on in Sprouts. I think they all were also seeing that alcohol sales were declining or flat at that point. So they decided to create a non-alc set, and we were one of the brands included in that.
Okay.
And then literally a month later, we got a meeting with Walmart, and I had to fly from New Zealand to Bentonville for 48 hours and had a 15-minute presentation. It was Dragon Den, there were 3 buyers. They tried the products, I presented, then they decided on the spot whether they were going to arrange us or not. Gave me a little golden ticket.
They gave you a golden ticket. That's what they do.
They do. So it's quite a big deal. But
It is. I can see that that's a thing, but I think it's very American, isn't it? So how many stores did that bring you to? Or doors, as they say in the States.
Yeah, how many doors? So in Walmart, it was about 1,000.
Wow.
Out of their 4,000 stores. And then Target was about the same.
So at what point then did you decide, okay, we've got to have a team in place, we need more funding? Talk to us about the other milestones then.
It was when we got Target and Walmart and we figured out how much stock we actually needed to make.
Wow.
It was over $1 million worth of product.
Okay.
And that's when we were like, we need money. We don't have that much money sitting in our bank account. So we went and did another raise. And again, one of the reasons why we chose some of the investors that we did was that we knew they had deep pockets and we knew we would have further rounds. And so we were able to go back to our existing investors. And it's always a good story when you're raising money for production and future purchase orders. So we did another round then and launched with Target and Walmart in 24, a year later.
Wow, that's incredible. And then you started employing a team over there. You've got the team split between the States and New Zealand.
Yeah, I was probably from Eat My Lunch, we had 200 employees in that business.
That is huge.
It was huge and I hated it. I hate managing people.
Okay.
It's not the reason I decided to start my own business.
Yeah.
And I think it's, it's one of the most challenging parts of having a business. So I was very clear with this business. I didn't want to employ a lot of people.
Right.
And also employing someone in the US is really scary.
Tell us more.
I think the costs, around healthcare and employee benefits, just generally the salaries are much higher because you've got to cover living costs and things like that. And one of our biggest challenges in the US has been actually finding people who will deliver on what they say they're going to do. I think Americans are so good at selling. You talk to them and they're amazing and they can do everything. And then actually finding people who can actually deliver on that has been one of the hardest things. And we've gone through 4 co-packers, 5 Amazon agencies, 3 brokers, so just really hard to find the right kind of people.
And that's costly in terms of time, effort, but money too, right? Because each one of those has got setup costs and the amount of time that you spend working with someone to make something happen, then it doesn't happen. Why do you think so many brands decide not to go into the States? If you had to reflect, what do you think are the hygiene factors that you have to be able to tick in order to say, right, if I don't have these in place, there's just no point? What are those things?
Way more money than you expect.
Okay.
Than you think you're going to use. So, I've talked to brands where they're like, oh, we're going to raise like $500,000. I'm like, okay, well, that will last you about 4 months.
Okay.
Like it just takes millions and millions of dollars, particularly because there are so many different layers as well. So, you don't just have a distributor, but you've got a broker and then there's fees and, everyone's taking a little cut.
Okay.
So it's super expensive to launch in the US.
Eventually, though, sure, can you make margin on a product? I mean, I know beverage has got way more gross margin than food generally because it's water and flavoring, right? Is there enough money with all those little cuts? Is there enough money to make margin if you're bringing it across? Well, you're not bringing it across though, are you? So talk to me about that in terms of SKU.
Again, just from a cost perspective, there's no point shipping stuff halfway around the world from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And particularly coming out of COVID, just all the freight challenges as well. So we decided to manufacture in market, which again sounds easy. There are a lot of co-packers, but finding the right one is really difficult.
Okay.
And it's not as cheap as people think. Like we thought the US would be really cheap. And actually the costs are about the same as in New Zealand, but just in US dollars. Yeah, so that's, I think, something you go in there thinking, oh, it'll probably cost half of what we're paying in New Zealand. And it just wasn't like that at all. It is really expensive. Having staff is expensive. What we pay someone in New Zealand would pay them pretty much double in the US.
Crikey.
So we actually decided to keep most of our operations team in New Zealand. So production, logistics, customer services, marketing, everything is managed from New Zealand.
Okay.
And that obviously also has its challenges. So the only people we have in the States are our general manager and 2 sales people.
And you're in charge of strategic marketing?
Mm-hmm.
And what about
Yeah.
then marketing execution?
Lots of agencies that we employ. And again, expensive, but, kind of easier to get rid of if things aren't working out.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's been really challenging, just finding the right partners and the right people.
That's really interesting. And so then when the others came into the market, so competitors coming into the market after you opened it, what happened then to velocity, rate of sale and general demand? I mean, did the category just grow exponentially because new people were coming in, or was it more difficult, or?
Yeah, the category exploded. And actually, it was great because we wanted more competitors to really build out this set. Because a lot of people are like, is this just a fad?
Yeah.
And when retailers like Target and Walmart come into a category, normally they're slow followers. Like Walmart would not look at a new category for 2 years. But the fact that they came in that first year, they're looking at the data and they've been seeing the trends.
Yeah.
And so it's not just a fad.
Or a niche. It's like the stamp of this is mass marketable.
Absolutely. The category in the US has grown in the last 3 years. It reached $1 billion last year.
Wow.
It's 400 million in the UK.
Okay.
So yeah, it's growing super fast and pretty much every retailer.
And you're here in the UK today. So is that just because you're on your way somewhere else, or are you in the UK because you're looking at business here?
Looking at business. Yeah. So we launched in the UK in December, a few months ago. Yeah. So we launched in 400 Morrisons.
Okay. And how's it doing?
It's doing really well. We weren't looking at the UK because the US is such a massive market, huge opportunities. And we just thought, the set's pretty mature in the UK. So there's kind of no real advantage for us getting in there. But then we got a call from one of the big retailers in the UK about 18 months ago. And I flew over, we met them, and they were saying, actually, what they're finding is that slightly younger consumer who are coming into this category, they don't really have the options that are right for them. There's big bottle spirits by big alcohol brands, but they're brands that their mothers or their parents or their grandparents are drinking.
They don't want a can of Gordon's.
No. And also the format. No one wants to spend 20, 30 pounds on a big bottle of non-alc spirits that they've never tried before and then still have to buy the mixes and everything else that goes with it. We saw that pattern in the US. Retailers are getting rid of non-alc big bottle spirits.
Oh, are they?
Yeah. And about 22% of the shelf space in the US is for non-alc RTDs.
Okay.
Whereas in the UK, you can find maybe a couple of brands on shelf here in that space. So again, it was a really exciting opportunity for us to go. We could actually be one of the first group of brands to launch in that segment. And we know, we have great liquid. And also from a communications and marketing, we're a bit more aligned with the UK. They kind of get our sense of humor. That's been challenging in the US, is trying to figure out how to speak to consumers there. And so we launched in December last year.
And you're happy with the results so far?
Yeah, really great early traction. Like after the first 8 weeks, we're the number 3 SKU in Morrisons.
In ready to drink, alcohol free?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wow. And who else is playing in that market in the UK?
Yeah, so Gordon's, quite a few own label brands. Tesco's has their own 0% gin and tonic. Waitrose has just launched their own range. There's an Australian brand called Naked Life that came into the market late last year. You've got brands like Cordino.
So how are you going to run 3 teams? I mean, because people would have said to me over the years, we'll just, stick your brand into France or stick it into Germany, it'll be fine. And I would say, well, no, it won't be, because you've got to have someone on the ground who can speak to the buyers in their language, and someone on the marketing team who really understands the different cultural reference points to make jokes in their language or speak to them in their language and the way they live. Manage the agencies, manage the category presentations, unlock the category value story for each retailer. How are you going to do that in each of those markets? I mean, you've got 3 potentially really significant markets now. I mean, the States obviously being massive, but that's one to keep your eye on all the time. You've got New Zealand on your eye, and now the UK, a nation. That won't take just one person either. What's the plan?
No. Yeah, so we've got a really good agency partner in the UK. And, that was something we'd learned from the US, just around comms and marketing and, not assuming that what we do for New Zealand is going to work anywhere else. So they helped us with the launch campaign.
And when you say comms, what do you mean? Social media, like look and feel, all of that. But what about the actual ops of that? Comms aside, because I know everyone can do that. Everyone can get a great agency. It's not, well, not everyone can. But you can find a great agency. But then, who's doing the line forms and who's doing the in-store like promotional plans and who's there to talk to the buyer and who's whatever.
Yeah, so we've got a really great distributor partner.
Okay. So you're partnering with the right people all around.
Yeah. So they're doing, a lot of that kind of in-store or with retailer execution with our support. Like I've attended every retailer meeting.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of travel going on there. But, I just think it's so important. And, we've never had a no yet from a meeting. And, I always insist that they're in person. So that particularly with our products, like being able to serve them in the right way, and when we're doing the tasting and being able to describe it and then tell the story behind it as well and share kind of our experiences. I think what retailers love is knowing what's happening in other markets. So, in the UK, we've been sharing what's been going on in the US in this RTD space, which isn't so significant here. In the US, they want to know what's happening in the UK.
Yeah, it's like the inside story, isn't it? I remember there was a buyer in Ireland. He's since retired, but he was a real character. But when I was working with Chobani, the US Greek yogurt company, I was with them for 3 years, based in Amsterdam, and looking at international expansion, which didn't ever really happen, but a lot of money was spent on it in the meantime. And this Irish buyer used to make a pretext of getting me down to very far from Dublin for one reason or another, but really it was just to understand the global market for, and particularly what was going on in the US with strange yogurt, because then he knew he'd be the only one this side of the hemisphere who had like that inside story in terms of the category, and they do love it. And I think it's you make a really interesting point about insisting that the meetings are face to face, and it kind of begs another question, which is, well, somebody listening to this might say, look, I can't even get through to the buyer. I can't even get an email response. So how can I insist? And I suppose if you've got real traction with your brand and your product in a market that is growing and they really feel that you have got something that is going to allow them to explode some value, they will. Unfortunately, if they don't, it's probably because it won't, which is a bit harsh, but it's kind of true.
There's definitely an advantage, a disadvantage not being from the local market, but the advantage is we are from New Zealand. And so I use that as an excuse to say, I'm flying all the way from New Zealand.
Yeah.
I'd love to come and see you in person.
Okay, that's great.
And that works 8 out of 10 times. and then I really do have to fly all the way.
What are the plans going forward? How big do you want this business to get before you... No, well, okay, you're not going to really answer that, are you? Before you sell it, how far do you think you can drive this business on your own? And are you going to stop with the UK, or are you going to keep going into new markets? Are you just going to prove these 3?
I think for now it's proving these 3. We've got quite a handful just with the US and UK. We still need to make UK a huge success, as you say. You can't just dump the product on shelf and expect that to go off by itself. So there's a lot we need to do in the UK. I think if we can prove out, the UK and the US, and also get the business to, things have changed a lot, I think, in beverage in the last couple of years. Before, when we were first raising and we had, Pernod on board, people were paying stupid multiples and getting in, and, it wasn't about profitability. It was all about top line growth. And now that has shifted for sure to that people want to see a path to profitability, that it's not just growing at all costs. So there's definitely been, a bit of re-engineering of our business to get us towards that.
What kind of multiples are you seeing at the moment?
Probably like 3 to 4.
EBITDA?
No, revenue.
Jesus.
Because there's not many beverages making positive EBITDA.
Are you serious? Okay, I thought there was lots of margin in canned beverages.
I think that's why for us, particularly when you don't own your own manufacturing, you can't compete with the big guys who are canning, millions and millions of cans a day. There's lots of big beverage brands in the US, like Liquid Death. They're doing hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not profitable.
I just don't understand that. I mean, I'd have to sit down. I haven't worked in a canned beverage business with a P&L in front of me, so I can't talk from experience. I can't imagine that because surely it's just water and flavorings and a can, and the bigger the volume. So what is it that drives that? Is it the fact that you've got so much marketing and in the States you've got all those different people to give a slice of the contribution to?
Yeah. So, I mean, say retailer margins, let's say it's 35 to 40. In the States, you also have a distributor, who can take anywhere between, say, 15 to 20.
Do you still have the 35 to 40 retailer margin, or does that come down? No, that doesn't come down. Okay, so you've got the distributor margin on top, and then do you have a broker as well?
And you have a broker, and normally they're on retainer until your business is certain size, and then they might take 2.5% to 5%.
So basically, you've got to make it work at a massive scale in the US or go home.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so challenging for so many brands. And you see these huge brands like Recess. I don't know if that brand's in the UK, but it's massive in the US. So it's like a mood enhancing drink.
Yeah.
They just raised, I think they raised something like, it was either 30 or 70 million US dollars.
Oh my God.
Right. And this brand has been in the market for ages and it's huge. It's everywhere, but they're still raising money.
Yeah, that just screams scary to me. Listen, Lisa King from AF Drinks, thank you so much for sharing so much detail and incredibly insightful view of how the mechanics of all of this work in the States and your own journey. You're really brave. It's really inspiring how brave you are, and you're so calm. At least you come across as really calm and brave and grounded. And and we're wishing you all the very best of luck. The UK LinkedIn CPG scene is so lively. So follow as many people as you can in there because you will learn so much about the UK scene through LinkedIn. It's like everybody's sharing all the time. And if you want to join our Next Gen CPG WhatsApp group and join the other founders in the UK who are leaning into unlocking value from AI and how to lead their businesses going forward with that, then you're so welcome. I can connect with your team and send you an invite.
Thank you so much.
Well, maybe you'll come back on in a year and let us know where you've got to. We'd love to follow up with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And thanks again for the samples. I really did enjoy, particularly loved your, what's the Campari one called?
The Aperol Spritz.
The Aperol Spritz. I loved that one. It was really good. Thank you so much, Lisa King from AF Drinks. Really enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Lisa and the whole Free AF team. I was really, delighted to talk about going into the States from a smaller country in a kind of a positive frame of mind. I mean, I know, yes, Lisa was talking about how much investment you need and how it's more expensive than you think it's going to be and how no brands over there apparently are profitable, no drinks brands. But so many times I hear stories of brands who just say, no, there's no point in going to the States. Forget it. It's not worthwhile. So personally, I was really interested to hear about a brand who is actually doing it and who is kind of facing up to the truths, the economic truths of what it's going to take. That was really great. I didn't talk enough about how nice these drinks are. There's so many different layers of flavor. The kind of the heat and the burn that we talked about is really lovely. I really enjoyed them. So highly recommend you try. If you want to follow Lisa and Free AF Drinks, all of the links are in the show notes below. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, if you got anything out of it at all, please do like, follow, subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify or your preferred player. Share with a colleague, share with a friend. It really does make a huge difference to us. And I pour my heart and soul into this podcast, and so does the team. If you want the equivalent of buying us a coffee, just subscribe and follow the show more often. Thank you so much.